Hey, my name is Matthew Vale. I am 34 years old, and I live by myself on a small farm just outside Wheatland, Oregon. It is not much compared to what most people have. It has a modest piece of land for wheat, a few rows of vegetables, a chicken coop, 2 dairy cows, an old red barn, and the 2-story wooden house that my parents left behind. But it is enough to keep a man busy from the time the sun rises until the light fades away. It is enough to stop the silence from taking over everything. People in town do not call me Matthew much anymore. They call me the man with the scar on the north farm. The scar runs from my left cheek down toward my collarbone. It is a pale, jagged line that never went away after the tractor accident 10 years ago. Before that accident, I used to drive into town more often. I used to smile without even thinking about it. There were even a couple of girls who looked at me like I might be worth their time. After the accident, everything changed. Children stared and hid behind their mothers. Women turned their faces away. Men clapped me on the shoulder with that careful, pitying look that said they were glad it had not happened to them. So I stayed on the land. The earth does not judge a man's face. Crops do not care if you are handsome or broken. If you take care of them the right way, they grow. I liked that kind of fairness. That afternoon in the middle of October, the sun was turning the wheat field behind the house into shining gold. I had just come back from the pumpkin patch. My hands were still dirty, and my shirt was damp with sweat. That's when I saw her, standing on my porch. Her name was Elena Morris. She was the daughter of Albert Morris, the man who had kept me from losing this place after the accident. When the bank wanted to take the farm away, Albert had stood in their office and told them I was not a failure. I was just someone who needed more time. He died 6 months ago from heart trouble. I had not seen much of Elena since the funeral. Now she was here, holding the front of her old coat like she was trying to hold herself together. Her brown hair was coming loose from its low knot, and her boots were dusty from the road. Her eyes were red, like she had been crying for a long time, but was refusing to let any more tears fall. I stopped at the bottom step. "Elena," I said quietly, "what is wrong?" She looked at me for a long moment. It was as if she had practiced this conversation 100 times and now could not remember a single word. Finally she lowered her head, and her voice came out barely above a whisper. "My father said you needed a wife?" I did not laugh. I did not ask her to repeat it, because the second I heard those words, I understood more than she probably meant to say. I stepped up onto the first stair, keeping enough distance so she would not feel trapped. I met her eyes and answered in a steady and simple way. He was right. Her head snapped up. Those blue eyes went wide and wet. She had clearly prepared herself for rejection, for pity, maybe even for anger. She had not prepared for calm agreement. She shook her head fast, and her voice cracked. "No, you do not understand. I have nothing to offer you. I just lost my job at Mrs. Caroline Whitmore's house. My landlord says I have to be out by the end of the week. I do not have money for another room. I do not have any family left. If I come here, I will only be a burden." When she said the word burden, her eyes dropped to her worn shoes. I saw her hands tremble. Whatever pride she had left was being crushed by her hard situation, and it hurt me more than I wanted to admit. I said her name very softly, "Elena." She went still. I took one more step but still did not touch her. "Your father was the best man I ever met in this town," I told her. 10 years ago, when I showed up here with nothing and no one, he taught me how to read the weather, how to fix a pump, how to look at soil and know what to plant the next season. When the accident nearly took everything from me, he was the one who told the bank I deserved another chance. Elena's lips trembled. I kept going. Before he died, he came out here. He was already weak. I told him I would come to his place instead, but he would not let me. He sat right there on that old wooden chair under the maple tree and said. I glanced toward the empty chair beneath the yellowing leaves. The wind moved through them with a dry, quiet sound. I spoke slowly, each word carrying the echo of Albert's voice in my head. "Matthew, Elena is just like her mother, proud enough to starve before she will take charity. When I am gone, if she is in trouble, she will not ask anyone for help. But you know what it is like to lose everything and have to start over. Look after the girl, even if she will not let you." Elena's tears finally fell. She covered her mouth with one hand, and her voice broke. I did not know, He told me he was going to see an old friend. I did not know he came here for that. I nodded. He did not want you to know. He knew you would fight it. Elena wiped her face with the back of her hand, trying to pull the pieces of herself back together. But if I stay here, what will people say? They already talk enough. Mrs. Whitmore fired me and told everyone I stole a silver bracelet from her. I did not, Matthew. I swear I did not. When she said it, she looked straight at me. Her eyes held both fear and anger, the look of someone who had been pushed into a corner too many times. I answered without hesitation. I believe you. I could tell those 3 words hit her harder than any comfort I could have offered, because it had probably been a long time since anyone had believed her that easily. I went on. This is not charity. The farm is too much for one person. The garden produces more than I can sell before it spoils. The house needs looking after. The paperwork, the market runs, the online orders. I cannot keep up with all of it. You need a roof. I need help. We can make a fair arrangement. Elena studied me, wary. What kind of arrangement? I took a slow breath. We get married, a simple civil ceremony. You will have the legal right to stay here, my insurance if you ever need it, a safe place. In return, you help with the house, the garden, and selling at the weekend market. You will have your own room, your own life. No one forces anything else on you. She was quiet for a long time. Her gaze moved over the wooden house behind me, then the golden field beyond it, then back to the scar on my face. I was used to people's eyes catching on that scar. Elena's eyes did not show disgust or pity, only exhaustion, caution, and a tiny spark of hope she looked afraid to acknowledge. She asked, her voice barely there, "What do you get out of this besides more trouble?" I gave her a small tired smile. Maybe a house that does not feel so quiet. The words made her eyes fill again. From somewhere in town, the church bell rang 6 o'clock. Elena stood there in the fading light, caught between losing everything and starting over. At last she drew a shaky breath and lifted her chin, even though her eyes were still afraid. When I looked at her and understood she was not asking about paperwork anymore, she was asking about a real turning point. I answered, "Monday. The courthouse opens at 9. We keep it simple. No party, no noise." Elena nodded slowly. Then Monday. I stepped up onto the porch and opened the front door, holding it for her. "Come inside tonight. Whatever you decide, you do not have to go back to that room in tears." She stood still for a few seconds. Then she walked past the threshold. And I did not know it yet, but from that moment on, the quiet life I had built for myself began to change direction. Monday morning arrived with a pale, clear sky. I woke before the sun and lay in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling. The house felt different already, like it was holding its breath. Down the hall, Elena's door was still closed. I had not heard her move around during the night. I wondered if she had slept at all. I shaved carefully for the first time in months, avoiding the scar as best I could. The white shirt I pulled from the back of the closet still smelled faintly of cedar from the trunk, where my mother used to keep winter clothes. The black jeans were the only pair without grease stains. I even cleaned my boots. It was not much, but it was the best I could do. When I came downstairs, Elena was already in the living room. She stood near the window with her back to me, wearing a simple, deep blue dress with small white embroidery along the collar. It was modest and a little old-fashioned. She turned when she heard my boots on the floor. The dress had belonged to her mother. She did not have to say it. I could tell by the way she touched the fabric, like she was afraid it might disappear. She looked at me and went still. Her eyes moved over the clean shirt, the shaved face, the boots. Something in her expression softened, though she tried to hide it. "You look different," she said quietly. I did not know what to do with my hands. "So do you." Her cheeks colored. She smoothed the front of the dress and looked down. "It is nothing special." "It is enough," I said, and I meant it. We did not talk much on the drive into town. Elena kept glancing at her hands in her lap. I kept both hands on the wheel and tried not to think about how small the cab of the truck suddenly felt with her sitting beside me. Sebastian Cole was already waiting outside the courthouse when we arrived. The old man wore his good Sunday shirt and had combed up what was left of his hair. He shook my hand, then turned to Elena with a gentle nod. "Your father fixed my mower for free one whole summer," he said. "He was a good man. I think he would be glad you were not alone anymore." Elena's eyes shone, but she did not cry. She only whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Cole." Rosa arrived a few minutes later. She hugged Elena hard, and then looked me over with open suspicion. I did not blame her. She pulled Elena aside, and spoke in a low, urgent voice I was not meant to hear. "Are you sure about this?" Elena glanced at me across the hallway. Her answer was quiet but steady. "I do not know what will happen, but I know he does not see me as a burden." Rosa studied me for another moment, then gave a small, reluctant nod. The ceremony itself was over in less than 10 minutes. A county clerk read the legal statements in a flat, bored voice. There was no music, no flowers, no guests except the 2 witnesses. When it came time for the rings, I took my mother's old silver band from my pocket. It was simple, a little worn at the edges. Elena stared at it. "It was hers," I said quietly. "I do not have much left of her. If you do not mind." She held out her left hand without speaking. Her fingers trembled just once when I slid the ring on. It fit better than I expected. The clerk cleared his throat. "You may kiss if you wish." Elena went very still. I saw the hesitation in her shoulders and decided not to make it harder for her. I leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to step back. She did not. I pressed my mouth to hers for no more than a second. It was barely a kiss at all. Just the briefest touch, but when I straightened up, I saw her eyes had gone wide and dark. She looked as surprised as I felt. Sebastian clapped his hands once, the sound loud in the quiet room. Rosa laughed through sudden tears. "Congratulations, you two," Sebastian said, voice rough. "Now go on home. A house with a woman in it should not have a cold stove." On the way back, Elena sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring at the silver ring. She turned it slowly with her thumb, like she was trying to convince herself it was real. "You hungry?" I asked after a while. She looked over at me as if she had forgotten food existed. "A little. I have got bread and cheese and some ham. I'm not much of a cook, but I have managed not to poison myself so far." A small laugh escaped her. It was the first real sound of relief I had heard from her since she appeared on my porch. "I can cook," she said. "My mother taught me. When my father was sick, I made his meals every day." She stopped. The sadness that lived just under her skin showed itself again. I did not offer empty comfort. I simply reached across the seat and rested my hand over hers for a moment. She did not pull away. When we turned onto the dirt road that led to the farm, Elena looked out at the fields and the old red barn. "It is bigger than I remembered," she said softly. "Too big for one person," I answered. Then I glanced at her. "Not anymore, though." She did not reply, but I saw her fingers tighten around the fabric of her dress. Inside the house, I showed her the room upstairs that had once been my mother's. It was simple: a wooden bed, a small dresser, an old mirror, and a chair by the window that looked out over the wheat field. On top of the dresser, I had placed a mason jar of wildflowers I picked that morning, before she woke up. Elena stood in front of the flowers for a long time. I felt suddenly foolish. I do not know what women like. I just thought a new room should have flowers. She turned around. Her eyes were wet again, but this time the tears looked different. Lighter. "Thank you, Matthew," she said, "for making me feel like I am not something that got left behind." I did not know how to answer that, so I only nodded. That evening we ate our first real meal together in the kitchen. I cut the bread, while Elena moved around the stove like she already belonged there. In 20 minutes, she had eggs with ham and fresh herbs, toasted bread with honey, sliced tomatoes from the garden, and hot coffee. I sat down and took one bite, then another. I did not speak for a long time. Elena watched me worried. "Is it bad?" "No," I said. "It is so good I am embarrassed. I have been calling dry bread breakfast for the last few years." She smiled, and for the first time since I met her, the smile reached her eyes. We talked while we ate. She told me about her mother dying when she was 12. I told her about mine dying of fever when I was 24. We did not say much after that, but the silence between us felt different than before. It felt like we were both recognizing the same shape of loneliness in each other. Later, when we climbed the stairs, we stopped in the hallway. Her door was on the left. Mine was on the right. I cleared my throat. "Your room is on the left. Mine is on the right. You can lock the door if you want." Elena nodded. She rested her hand on the doorknob, then looked back at me. "Good night, Matthew." "Good night, Elena." She hesitated. A faint blush rose in her cheeks. Good night, husband. The word landed in the quiet house like something fragile and important. She slipped into her room and closed the door before I could answer. I stood in the hallway longer than I needed to. For the first time in many years, the old wooden house did not feel quite so empty. The next morning I woke at my usual hour, before the light had fully reached the fields. For a few seconds I lay still, listening. The house was quiet, but not the same kind of quiet as before. There was someone else breathing behind one of the closed doors. I went downstairs and tried to make breakfast the way I always did. Eggs in a pan, bread in the toaster. I burned half the eggs, and the toast came out black on one side. I was standing at the stove, staring at the mess like it had personally insulted me, when Elena walked into the kitchen. She had changed into a simple gray cotton dress and tied her hair back. She stopped when she saw the smoke. "What are you doing?" she asked, half surprised, half amused. I looked at the ruined pan and sighed. I thought I was making breakfast. Turns out I was just threatening the kitchen. Elena laughed. It was a real laugh. Soft but bright, and it filled the room in a way the house had not heard in years. She stepped forward and gently took the pan out of my hands. "Go wash up," she said. "When you come back, there would be actual food." I started to argue, then saw the look on her face and decided it was wiser to listen. 20 minutes later, I returned to the smell of proper cooking. On the table were rolled eggs with ham, toast with honey, sliced tomatoes from the garden, and hot coffee. I stood in the doorway for a moment, not sure what to say. Elena saw my expression, and her cheeks turned pink. "This is what a wife does," she said, trying to sound practical. "Even if it is only on paper, I can still feed you properly." I sat down and took the first bite. Then I did not speak for a long time. Elena started to look nervous. "Is it bad?" "No," I said. "It is so good I am ashamed of every breakfast I have made myself these last few years." She smiled, and I saw a small piece of confidence return to her eyes. After breakfast, I took her around the whole farm. I showed her the wheat field, the chicken coop, the red barn, the pumpkin patch, and the long rows of tomatoes, lettuce, peppers, and herbs. She walked slowly between the plants, then knelt down without being asked, and started pulling weeds from around the tomato plants. "These need support," she said, voice suddenly sure. "If you do not stake them, the fruit will pull the stems down. The lettuce should be harvested soon too, or it will turn bitter." I watched her, surprised. Elena looked up and caught me staring. "What?" I was wondering why Caroline Whitmore would fire someone who clearly knows what she is doing. Her face darkened. She sat back on her heels and wiped her hands on her dress. She said I stole a silver bracelet. She told everyone she found it in my pocket while I was cleaning her bedroom, but I did not take it, Matthew. My father taught me that honor is worth more than money. I may be poor, but I do not steal. "I believe you," I said at once. She looked at me like she still could not understand why I kept saying those words so easily. I sat down on the edge of the raised bed beside her, not caring about the dirt on my jeans. "Caroline Whitmore once tried to buy this land from me. I turned her down. Ever since then, she has done everything she can to make my life harder, spreading rumors, pressuring stores not to buy my produce, even leaning on the bank. She does not like being told no. If she fired you, there was probably something in it for her." Elena rested her hand on the soil. Her shoulders were shaking. She asked, voice almost breaking, "Why are you so good to me?" I looked at the rows of green plants we were sitting between. "Because I know what it feels like to be judged by something you cannot change. After the accident, people looked at my face and decided who I was. Some said God was punishing me. Some thought I was dangerous. Most just looked at me like I was broken. I touched the scar on my cheek without thinking. Your father was one of the few people who still saw me as a man. Now it is my turn to return the favor." Elena stared at the scar for a long moment. Then she did something almost no one had ever done. She reached up and gently touched it with her fingertips. I went completely still. She did not pull her hand away right away. Her voice was quiet but certain. "I see a good man who has been hurt. I see strength, not ugliness." I could not answer. My throat had closed. After that morning, our days found a rhythm. Elena woke early and cooked. She worked in the garden with a focus that made me realize how much she needed to feel useful. I spent most of my time in the fields or fixing fences, but I found more and more reasons to walk past the garden. I asked if she needed water, even when the bucket was already full. I asked if the tomatoes were ripe, even when they were still green. She always looked at me like she knew exactly what I was doing, but she never called me on it. In the evenings, we sat by the wood stove. I showed her the old bookshelf that still held my mother's books, American novels, farming manuals, a few poetry collections, and a worn copy of Don Quixote. Elena was surprised I read so much. She teased me gently. I thought farmers with scars did not have time for books. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled about my own face in years. 2 weeks after the wedding, we went to the Saturday farmers market in Wheatland together. The first time, people only stared. The second time, the whispering started. Women turned to each other and covered their mouths. Men looked at me with a mixture of pity and something sharper. Rosa found us between the stalls and pulled Elena aside. I stayed close enough to hear. Elena, you need to know. Caroline is telling everyone you married Matthew because you are pregnant. She is saying the whole marriage is fake, that you are using him to get out of debt. Elena went pale. What? Rosa squeezed her hand. I know it is a lie, but people are talking. She is also saying you seduced a lonely man. That was when Caroline Whitmore appeared. She was in her 50s, wearing an expensive coat that did not belong at a farmer's market. Her jewelry caught the light every time she moved. She stopped in front of our table and looked Elena up and down like she was inspecting something cheap. Well, the new bride, Caroline said, voice sweet and poisonous. You look right at home selling vegetables, Elena. Even if your father tried to make you look like a lady, you always end up back where you belong. I kept my voice cold. Morning, Mrs. Whitmore. You here to buy something, or just wasting our time? She turned to me with a sharper smile. Still blunt, Matthew. I suppose desperate men do not have time for matters. Then, she raised her voice just enough for the neighboring stalls to hear. How is married life? Have you realized your mistake yet? The whole town knows she only married you to escape being homeless. Before I could answer, Elena stepped closer to me and took my hand in front of everyone. Her fingers were cold, but her voice was clear. My marriage to Matthew is our business, not yours. And if you care so much about our lives, maybe you should ask yourself why your own life is so empty that you have to fill it with cruel rumors. The market went quiet. Caroline's face flushed dark. You are nothing but a penniless orphan, she hissed. I can destroy you with one word. Elena's grip on my hand tightened, but she did not back down. You already tried. You accused me of stealing. You took my job. You tried to put me on the street. But I am still standing here because the truth is stronger than your lies. Caroline's voice propped, low and vicious. The truth is you climbed into his bed before you were married. The truth is there is probably a bastard in your belly right now. A ripple of shocked whispers moved through the crowd. Elena went white. I felt her hands start to shake. I stepped forward. Elena is my wife in the eyes of the law and before God. She has more honor than anyone spreading lies out of spite. If anyone here wants to speak badly about my wife, they can say it to my face. But I am warning you now, I will not stand by and watch anyone drag her name through the mud. Father Thomas, who had been buying vegetables for the church, walked over. He looked at Caroline with quiet disappointment. Mrs. Whitmore, those are serious accusations without proof. A decent community is not built on slander. I suggest you apologize or leave. Caroline looked around and realized the crowd was no longer on her side. People had seen Elena holding my hand. They had seen the way I stood in front of her. They had seen that whatever this marriage was, it did not look like a performance. She spoke low, full of threat. This is not over. Then she turned and walked away. Elena stood beside me, still trembling. I leaned down and asked quietly, "You all right?" She looked up at me. Her eyes were red, but she had not broken. "No," she said honestly, "but I will not let her decide who I am." I took her hand again. From now on, we face this together. It was the first time I had said we, and truly meant it as something more than an arrangement. Something between us had shifted. It no longer felt like we were only surviving. It had started to feel like we were becoming a family. 3 days after the market, the sky changed. From early morning, the clouds had been gathering low and dark on the horizon. By midday, the wind had picked up, bending the wheat and making the old maple tree groan. I stood on the porch watching the sky and knew we were in for a bad one. I went into the kitchen, where Elena was washing vegetables. "Elena," I said, "a big storm is coming. I need to secure the barn, cover the hay, and lock up the tools. Can you get the chickens inside, close all the windows downstairs, and bring in extra water?" She dried her hands immediately, face serious. We worked in tense silence. Elena carried firewood inside and filled buckets with water. I nailed extra boards across the barn doors and checked the cows. The wind was already strong enough to push against my body when I crossed the yard. The rain started just before dark. Heavy driving sheets that sounded like gravel hitting the roof. I was in the barn tightening a tarp when I heard the chicken coop door slam open in the wind. Several chickens were already out, running panicked in the downpour. I shouted toward the house, "Elena, get inside, I will handle it." But she had already seen them. She came running through the rain in her old coat, hair plastered to her face, trying to catch two of the terrified birds near the big oak tree. I dropped what I was doing and ran after her. "Elena, go back." She caught one chicken and bent to grab another. At that exact second, I heard a loud, sickening crack above us. I looked up. A thick branch of the old oak had split and was falling straight toward where she stood. My blood turned to ice. "Elena!" She looked up too late. I lunged forward and threw my whole body into hers. We hit the ground hard and rolled through the mud as the branch crashed down exactly where she had been standing. The impact shook the earth. I ended up on top of her, arms braced on either side of her shoulders, breathing hard. Rain poured over both of us. Her wet hair stuck to her cheek. Her eyes were wide with shock. I was almost shouting, voice raw with fear. "Are you out of your mind? Do you have any idea what just happened? You could have died over a couple of chickens." Elena was still clutching the bird against her chest, breathing fast. I did not want them to die. I grabbed her shoulders, my hands were shaking. "Chickens can be replaced. You cannot." She looked at me. I knew she heard what I had not said out loud, that the thought of losing her had terrified me more than anything in years. "Matthew," she whispered. Lightning split the sky. It was not like the careful kiss at the courthouse. This one was desperate and rough and full of everything I had been holding back for weeks. Fear, relief, want, and something deeper I was no longer willing to name. Elena kissed me back almost at once. Her free hand came up and tangled in my wet hair, pulling me closer. For those few seconds, the storm, the mud, the thunder, none of it mattered. Only the fact that she was alive and warm beneath me. When we finally broke apart, we were both shaking. I said, voice hoarse, "We need to get inside, now." We ran for the house, leaving the remaining chickens to fend for themselves. I slammed the door just as another gust tried to rip it off the hinges. Elena stood in the middle of the living room, soaked to the skin, teeth chattering. Her face was still pale. I grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," I said, trying to sound practical even though my own hands were still unsteady. "You will get sick." Elena looked at me. My own clothes were just as wet. "So will you." We stared at each other. The line we had both been careful not to cross since the wedding suddenly felt very thin. Thunder rolled again, shaking the windows. I turned toward the wall. "There are dry clothes in the chest by the sofa. You change first. I will not look." Elena did not answer right away. I heard the wet fabric hit the floor, then the sound of the chest opening and her moving around. A minute later she spoke, voice still a little shaky. "I am done. Your turn." I pulled off my soaked shirt. When I turned around, I knew she was looking. I felt the old reflex tighten in my chest. The scars did not stop at my face. They ran across my shoulder and down my side, like cracks in burned wood. I spoke without looking at her. "Not pretty, I know." Her answer came immediately, soft but certain. "They are part of you, and you are beautiful to me." I turned. She was wearing one of my old flannel shirts. Her wet hair fell over her shoulders. She did not look away from me. I walked toward her. "Elena, what happened out there was not just fear." She cut me off, voice trembling but clear. "Then do not pretend it was." I looked at her. Every wall I had built since the accident felt like it was collapsing. "I do not know exactly when it started," I said. "Maybe the day you stood on my porch. Maybe the first morning you cooked for me. Maybe the moment you touched my scar without flinching. But when I thought I was about to lose you, I understood." Elena stepped closer. I finished the sentence. I have fallen in love with my wife. Tears mixed with the rain still on her face. She answered, voice breaking, I love you too. I think I started loving you the day you gave me a roof, without asking for anything in return. And every day after that, I loved you a little more. I reached up and brushed the tears from her cheek with my thumb. Then there are no more separate rooms. No more pretending this is just an arrangement. If you want it, I want this marriage to be real. Elena did not hesitate. I want it. Outside, the storm screamed like it wanted to tear the farm apart. But inside the old wooden house, beside the wood stove, two lonely people had finally found the place they belonged. That night, the marriage we had made out of necessity became a marriage made out of love. The morning after the storm, I woke to the feeling of Elena's back pressed against my chest and her hair across my arm. For a few seconds, I did not move. I just listened to her breathing and let myself believe this was real. She stirred, turned in my arms, and looked at me. Her cheeks were still pink, but this time she did not look away. Good morning, husband, she whispered. The word no longer felt borrowed. It felt like it had always belonged to us. The storm had left its mark. Part of the barn roof was torn away, 2 sections of fence were down, and 4 chickens had not survived the night. Elena stood in front of the coop, with her arms wrapped around herself, eyes full of guilt. I am sorry, she said quietly. If I had not been so stupid and run out there. I stepped behind her and put my hands on her shoulders. You saved 2 of them. More importantly, you are still here. Do not apologize for having a soft heart. She leaned back against me without speaking. Later that afternoon, Sebastian came by to check on us. He looked at the way I kept my hand on Elena's back when we walked across the yard, and at the way she reached up without thinking to straighten my collar. He smiled like he had known all along. But his news was not good. Caroline is making it official, he said, voice serious. She has got a lawyer now. She is talking to the bank, even filed something with the county, questioning whether your marriage is real. The bank is talking about calling in your loan early, $30,000 due in 2 weeks. Elena went cold beside me. She can do that? Sebastian sighed. She has got money and connections. If she can convince people you were forced into this marriage, or that it is just a business deal, she might drag you into court. And the bank is already feeling pressure from her. I clenched my jaw. How long do we have? 2 weeks, maybe less. Elena and I sat under the old maple tree where her father had once spoken to me. The branch that almost killed her had been cleared, but the scar on the trunk remained. She held my hand tightly. I am scared, she said. Not of losing the farm. I am scared of losing you. I pulled her against my side. You will not lose me. Even if we lose the land, the house, everything else, as long as we still have each other, we can start again. She looked up at me, eyes wet. How can you be so sure? Because I have already lost almost everything once. I learned that things can be taken away, but real love only disappears if you let it go. The next morning, we went to see Father Thomas and a local lawyer. Rosa helped us dig for proof. Her cousin worked in the county records office. 3 days later, she drove out to the farm with her face flushed, carrying a folder. I found it, she said, spreading papers across the kitchen table. Caroline bought a piece of land from old Mr. Ethan Ruiz when he was already losing his mind. The sale looks fraudulent. She used that land as collateral to pressure the bank. If we can prove it, her power over them collapses. We planned to take the documents to the county office the next morning, but that night I heard movement near the barn. I got up at once. Elena woke too. I tried to tell her to stay inside, but she grabbed my hand, eyes determined. No, we go together. We moved quietly down the stairs. I carried a piece of wood. Elena held the flashlight. When we reached the barn, 3 men were pouring gasoline along the wooden wall. One of them was Brad Miller. I shouted, "Stop." They froze. Brad looked panicked. "Matthew, this is not personal. Caroline pays well. I owe her." Elena stepped forward beside me, voice sharp. "So you are going to burn our barn, our harvest, everything we have built?" Brad did not answer. Then lights appeared from the road. Sebastian and several neighbors came walking fast, carrying flashlights and tools. Sebastian had seen strange cars on the property and called for help. Sebastian's voice was cold. "Not so fast. The whole town is going to hear about this. Two of the men ran. Brad was caught. By morning, he had confessed everything to the sheriff and the county judge. 3 weeks later, the public hearing was held in the town hall. Elena and I walked in holding hands. Caroline sat across from us with 2 lawyers. She still wore expensive clothes, but her hands were shaking. Judge Fernando Reyes read the ruling in a clear voice. First, the marriage between Matthew Vale and Elena Morris is legal and valid. Father Thomas and multiple witnesses have confirmed it was entered into willingly. There is no evidence of coercion. Their relationship has clearly developed into a genuine one. Elena let out a shaky breath. I squeezed her hand. Second, there is clear evidence that Caroline Whitmore purchased land from Mr. Ethan Release through fraudulent means while he lacked mental capacity. That transaction is declared void. The collateral she used to pressure the bank is no longer valid. Her interference with Mr. Vale's loan is ruled improper. The room erupted in murmurs. Caroline shot to her feet, voice cracking with rage. This is all because of Albert Morris. He humiliated me in front of the whole town 30 years ago. Father Thomas stood up slowly. Albert is gone, Caroline. The person who destroyed your life is not him. It is you, for holding on to that hatred all these years. Caroline looked around the room. No one supported her anymore. No power, no fear. Only a woman who had spent her life trying to punish anyone who had ever told her no. She walked out of the hall in heavy silence. When the doors closed behind her, people began to clap. It was not loud celebration. It was relief. Rosa hugged Elena, crying and laughing at the same time. Sebastian put a hand on my shoulder, voice thick. Your mother would be proud. Albert would be too. That night, the town held a small gathering in the square. There was music, food, and late apologies. Elena and I danced under strings of lights between the wooden posts. I leaned down and spoke into her ear. Do you remember the night you stood on my porch and said your father told me I needed a wife? Elena smiled. And you said he was right? I shook my head. I was wrong. She looked up surprised. I kept my eyes on hers. I did not need a wife. I needed you. Exactly you. My partner, my love, my home. Elena's eyes filled with happy tears. I love you, Matthew Vale. Every scar, every silence, every part of you. 6 months later, the farm looked completely different. Elena's garden had become the most popular stall at the market. We paid off the loan on time, fixed the barn roof, and added more chickens and 2 goats. People who used to avoid me now stopped by regularly. Sebastian came for Sunday dinner every week. Rosa was planning her own wedding. One spring afternoon, Elena stood in the middle of the tomato rows with her hand resting lightly on her stomach. I walked over from the field and saw the look on her face. Elena? She took my hand and placed it where hers had been. We are going to have a baby. I stood completely still. Then I lifted her off the ground and spun her in the middle of the garden while she laughed and cried at the same time. I love you, I said, voice breaking. I love both of you. I love this family. Elena smiled through her tears. My father was even more right than he knew. You did not just need a wife, you needed a family. That evening we sat under the old maple tree. I had built a new wooden bench there and carved our initials into the back, M and E intertwined. Elena rested her head on my shoulder. She spoke softly into the wind. Thank you, Dad. You were right. I looked out at the sun setting behind the wheat field, my arm around my wife, and my hand resting over the place where our first child was growing. I had once believed my life would only ever be soil, seasons, old scars, and silent rooms. But Elena had stood on my porch with a trembling voice and one simple sentence, and from that sentence, I had been given everything. This story teaches us important lessons about life, love, and community. It shows that true kindness and belief in someone can change lives, especially when they feel alone or judged. Scars, whether on the outside or inside, do not define a person's worth. Real love grows from respect, honesty, and choosing to see the good in each other every day. It reminds us that family is not only about blood, but about the people who stand by you in hard times. Standing up against lies and cruelty with truth and courage brings justice and stronger bonds. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Your support helps this channel grow, and allows us to bring you more amazing stories. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.